Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you here this evening. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy diaries to be with us here for the launch of Norman Drummond's latest book, Step Back, Finding the Way Forward in Life. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Drew Drummond, and I'm the Managing Director of Drummond International. And Norman Drummond is our chairman. At Drummond International, our sole aim is to help individuals and organisations find purpose and meaning in their work and life. We have to get better at listening and valuing ourselves and others. The term values-based leadership, I feel, is in danger of being overused. And at Drummond International, we see it as very important to be able to name those values out loud and try and live those out in all of our endeavours. Our approach is very much starting where you are, not where others would like you to be. And we're incredibly proud of the services and offerings that we've been able to deliver over the last 16 years. It is this sense of purpose, starting where you are, that has led to the publication and writing of the book Step Back in order to find a way forward. It really captures Norman Drummond's lifetime of experiences, reflections, and leadership examples. We're very fortunate with the organisations with whom we work across different parts of the world to have a wide range of insights and the opportunity to have impact. Time and time again, people have come to us and said, if only. I wish I'd done something else. I wish I'd called it earlier. And in enabling people to step back, we have found that this has given people a real sense of what you can do, a real sense of the opportunity to deal with whatever lies ahead of us. Do we not, ladies and gentlemen, lead very, very fast and busy lives? Might we take time to step back, to slow down, to avoid judging things too quickly, to avoid making snap decisions? We've been fortunate in seeing real benefit in enabling our clients to step back, where major international companies are able to report an improved output and performance due to taking dedicated time looking at their working relationships. Professionals like some of you gathered here this evening being able to have a choice around what a relationship with their family might look like in light of very successful working careers. Or communities that are able to have a real sense of ambition and take control of the conditions that have otherwise had a negative impact on the health and well-being of those around them. I could go on, but in essence, taking time to step back is so, so important. And I hope, and in fact I'm going to ask for your help here, in that if you are so inspired from what you hear this evening in the launch of our next book, Step Back, in order to find a way forward in life, that you will be able to take this message outside of this room so we can pass on the lifetime of work of Norman Drummond to the people and the next generation beyond. We need to step back, do we not? It's so important that we take the time to step back. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Norman Drummond, founder and chairman of Columba 1400 and Drummond International. My father, the old man, that's as close as I'm going to get to Prince Charles. However, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Norman Drummond to share with us the how to step back, finding the way forward in life. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was privileged shortly after London 2012 to be invited to speak at a major international conference in Istanbul, and sharing the platform was Sebastian Coe, Lord Coe, who, as you might imagine, was basking in the afterglow of London 2012. And he did something which I hadn't had the courage so to do, which was to tell a story ab initio about his native Yorkshire. And it was something along the lines of these. It's difficult to tell a native story, if I can call it that way, in a multinational audience, because it sometimes just bombs. Anyhow, this one didn't, but I'll leave you to make up your mind. Sebco said that when he'd come back from the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics with a fistful of medals, he was asked to go and speak in his hometown of Barnsley. And going to Barnsley, he was asked to speak to a big gathering there, and he prepared hard, and he thought he'd spoken the speech of his life. He sat down, ladies and gentlemen, to what he described as a thunderous silence. And it was only broken by the chair of the evening putting his hand on Seb's elbow or Seb's arm and saying, "Don't worry, lad, we don't do clapping in Barnsley." And then he said, "No, we just let you live." I will risk in that genre describing to you how in 1963, when a team that was called Glasgow Rangers were in Anderlecht, and they were, in those days you used to travel with your blazer and flannels and your badge and your club tie. Now professional footballers travel in their pajamas, it seems to me. They go in their own planes perhaps, and they come back immediately after the end of the game, either in their own plane or somebody else's plane. But in those days they went on the same flight and they stayed for dinner. Can you imagine it? The Belgian president, suave, elegant, 3 different languages, Flemish, French, and English, and then it's the turn for Rangers to speak. Well, in terms of that, what might be called now distributed leadership, the manager at the time was a guy called Scott Simon. And Scott Simon pointed to his captain, Bobby Shearer, some of you will remember him well, known as fondly as Nanek Shearer. He was 5'3" and is probably amongst Scotland's greatest ever halfbacks. But in his distributed leadership, he pointed at Shearer and said, "Shearer, speak." So that's what things were done in those days, weren't they? And Shearer got to his feet, and this is what he said, ladies and gentlemen. He said, "On behalf of Glasgow Rangers Football Club, I'd like to say 3 things. Ta for a gam, ta for a nosh, and ta for a bevy." Which, translated for our international guests, is thank you for the game, thank you for the food, and thank you for the drink. Anyhow, he sat down, and the Belgian president, as suave as ever, got to his feet, and he said, "Mr. Shearer, I'd like to thank you so much for your wonderful speech. But most of all, I'd like to thank you for your sincere attempt to speak to us in our own language." Language has been at the heart of my relationship with my agent, Kay Macaulay, the celebrated Pimlico agency, who I met in 2002, and we began to talk, and she said, "There's a book or 2 in you, and we need to have it in your language." And so began in 2004 the publication, some of you will know, of The Spirit of Success. The Spirit of Success, which went well, and it was published in several languages. And I'm particularly grateful to Kay for her start, the start that she has given me. And how lovely that Kay is with us tonight, all the way from New York. Isn't that great, ladies and gentlemen? And thank you for your generosity in so many ways, Kay. That book had 3 questions in it. First of all, who are you? Do you really know who you are? Secondly, why are you working in the way that you are or not? Why are you living and working? Thirdly, what else might you do with the rest of your life in life and work? 3 contemporary questions of a language that we felt was right for a time when things were a little more plentiful than they are now, and it was my view that people were beginning to lose their purpose, to lose their identity, and lose a real sense of why they're here on this world. So that book went well, and then we were asked in 2008, at the time of the global financial crisis, by then Ian Metcalf, Director of Publishing at Hodder, and Ian said to me, "Let's do something values-based for these particular times." And so by 2010, we had published The Power of 3, which some of you will remember has 3 principles, 3 wisdoms, 3 principles, and 3 values. So how do we get then to 2015? Well, 2015, or maybe about 2013, Ian, I think it probably was, and how good to welcome Ian here tonight, and thank you again for all your help along the way. 2013 or so, we were beginning to wonder if we are living in an age of what I would call over-communication. I expect several of you to nod. Over-communication. that we are laden with other people's I knew you said bureaucratic nonsense, but so much of our bureaucracy is nonsensical because knowledge has taken over from wisdom, I believe. And how do we speak to people, encourage people in these pressure-driven days when over-communication takes over, when the corporate veil comes or the digital veil comes, and our lives seem to be run by external forces rather than ourselves? And so the step back came into being. Step back, encouraging people to step back and to take a look at their lives and where they're going, allowing people to take control of their own lives, encouraging people to take control of their own lives, rather than merely being led by the corporatization, where you're like a file server. You belong to an organization and you just keep sticking with it, and you go up a little further, all the rest of it, and then you have a stop and think, I'm going to do something else with my life. Oh, no, we'll pay you a bit more and you can stay if you're lucky. But what a world we live in, what a pressurized world we live in. And I'm wondering if any of you out there will recognize with me the phrase that sometimes if you're operating at a senior level, if you're operating responsible for anything, and there's no more responsible duty in life is it than perhaps being a family member and looking after your family. Whatever you're involved with, the step back is for you. But I'm wondering if you have reached a stage when occasions you feel your mind's like mince. I don't think I have to translate that, but it's a very Scottish expression, I think. Your mind's like mince. You're just, all the wires are kind of chewed up and you wonder what to do next. Then I'm wondering how many of you out there have experienced spiraling not to do with your cookery, but spiraling when you spiral upwards because you've got so many worries and you don't know what to turn to next. And so give me another worry and that'll keep me in my worrisome state. Or you begin to descend in your spiral, and you descend, worst of all, into areas of desperation. How am I going to get through? And I become despondent, and worst of all, I become depressed. So we have this minds like mince, occasioned often by the pace of the incessancy of modern living. We have this spiraling, which happens to take over, and then often we have plate spinners. Most of you here are plate spinners in your own way. You have different sets of plates, and what I've noticed working with senior people in various situations across the world, that the last plate, or the most difficult plate, if I can put it that way, if you're with me in my analogy, is the one that defines your behavior, because you get so steamed up about that last plate, and what am I going to do about it? And you've got these 5 or 6 other plates that are going on in your life, and the behaviors which you ultimately will regret if you go in that pent-up way are behaviors that you then exemplify to the other plates and the people responsible for them. So hence the need to step back and to find the way forward. Step back for a few moments. Step back for an hour in a day. Step back for a month in a year, or step back for a retreat wherever you can. Take time to care for yourself. Now, the sad thing is that we are beginning to discover that those in senior positions, and medical research would bear this out, the sad thing is that we are beginning to internalize the external. I'll say that again. To internalize the external, so that worries and fears and anxieties or whatever can come not just to our shoulders, but they can, as the Americans would say, come into your gut. They come into your stomach, and you get tight, and you get tense, and you get nervous. And worst of all, they come into your heart. So the medics are telling us, several medics here tonight, that external forces are creating internal dis-ease. And then we may reach a stage where, if we don't address that, where we have a setback which could be an ultimate setback, or it could be a penultimate setback if you're lucky, when perhaps your health suffers, when perhaps someone close to you dies, passes on, and you begin to realize your own fragility, when a great anxiety over the loss of a job or a contract, or not getting back into work or whatever. When these things happen to us, it brings on further anxiety. We begin to really feel it, and we can internalize it to an extraordinary extent. And if you're fortunate to survive your first setback, and it isn't the ultimate setback, then there is the opportunity to step back, because you're made to step back. These bodies of ours, these souls of ours, begin to say, enough is enough. And so we have to step back. And it's then, in the words of the old Victorian hymn, that we begin to count our many blessings and name them one by one, and we realize how fortunate we are to be alive, As I get increasingly older, how fortunate I am to be able to ride a bicycle and walk around, and I begin to count my many blessings, to have family who love me and I love them, to have friends, good friends. And it's in stepping back that we begin to consider and to remember and to count our many, many blessings. 3 questions. Are we all right? No one's leaving yet. 3 questions. I wonder how many of you, or how many of you have recently chosen to spend time on your own? I wonder how many of you have chosen to spend time on your own in silence, not with these things on or headphones or whatever. On your own in silence. I wonder how many of you have chosen to spend time on your own and listen to your heartbeat. Because if you do away with distractions and you do away with noise, and we seem to be driven to noise, we seem to be driven to social occasions where either we don't want to go or people really don't want to see us, but we think we've got to do it. But if your body is saying something else to you, your soul is saying something else to you, you need to step back. We need to take time. We need to take time to step back in order to recognize where we might go forward. So interesting, isn't it? How few of us spend time alone. How few of us spend time in silence. How few of us spend time listening to our hearts. Now, the great Scottish philosopher and theologian Henry Drummond, regrettably only a namesake, but Henry Drummond was the first professor of science and religion in the University of Edinburgh, the first in the world. And he said this, he said in a great address of his, which was a very slim volume called The Greatest Thing in the World, and The Greatest Thing in the World was evidently the bestseller in English and in other language, second only to the Bible, in the late 19th and early 20th century. And there's a paragraph in that address, the bestseller, which says simply this: when you step back and look at your life, you will discover that the times where you felt most fully human and fully alive were those times when you were acting in a spirit of kindness and generosity and love. Now, we have here tonight various representatives of Columba 1400, not least our Chief Executive Maggie Cunningham and Susan Warren and Mary Claire Drummond and others too. We now have, including our operation in Australia and in South Africa, over 8,000 young graduates who have had the courage to step back, who have had the courage, if you like, to enjoy and appreciate the silence, who have, in the words of Ramsay MacDonald, the first Labour Prime Minister, found a hill road. Ramsay MacDonald, you may remember, had a tough time. I'm not suggesting you were there in the 20s, but he had a very tough time as the first Labour Prime Minister, a coalition Prime Minister. And what people didn't know in early 20th century London, that Ramsay MacDonald was the illegitimate son of a chambermaid in Lossiemouth. But he carried that burden and he made it, big time, but trammeled with worry and anxiety. And the way that Ramsay MacDonald stepped back was to get the sleeper from London to Lossie and to rediscover his roots. And he walked the Drover's Road between Lossie and Elgin. That was how that was his hill road. And in his memoirs, Ramsay MacDonald wrote this. He said, "Our lives are sometimes like grass, often too trodden upon." Keen horticulturalists will know what that looks like. Flat grass, lifeless. Our lives are sometimes like grass, often too trodden upon. But he said, when other friends fail, the hill road never does. When other friends fail, the hill road never does. I wonder how many of you have a hill road, a special place where you can be yourself and you can look back and look forward at the same time. Another aspect of stepping back, which are now 8,000 and more graduates in Australia and South Africa. I should have mentioned as well a burgeoning operation in South Africa for Columba 1400. Another aspect is have trusted other. I'm wondering how many of you have a trusted other in your life. I was asked to do things, have been throughout my life, at a comparatively early age. Some would say a ridiculously early age. It's only as I get older I realize how ridiculous it was to appoint me at an early age to some of the things for which I've been responsible. And very often people would have come to me and said, "Norman, if you need a word, I'm there for you," and all the rest of it. I don't think it was the arrogance of youth necessarily that made me say thank you very much. I suspect it was my fear of failure. So much to lose, fear of failure. I suspect also there was a sense of confidentiality, being really careful about who your trusted other is. But if we are to step back, as those 8,000 and more Columbans have done, to step back, we need to find a hill road. We need to find a place where we can be safe in a confidential setting with a trusted other. The great professor, late professor of Glasgow University, Professor William Barclay, some of you may remember, he had his own television show, you remember, in the 60s and I think the 70s perhaps as well. But Willie Barclay said this in a famous prayer. He said, "We thank you for those to whom we can go at any time and never feel a nuisance, knowing that they will neither laugh at our dreams or mock at our failures." What an accolade to be a trusted other to someone in that context. How wonderful to have a trusted other. We thank you for those to whom we can go at any time and never feel a nuisance, knowing that they will neither laugh at our dreams or mock at our failures. And so step back in order to go forward in life. We find in our work at Columba 1400, and we hope and pray that the huge majority of those 8,000 will go on continuing to lead lives of stepping back, of self-monitoring, of having a hill road, of having a trusted other in their lives, and the organization always a trusted other. We hope at Drummond International, we hope and pray that the huge majority of those who have worked with us and will work with us will find it helpful to step back in order to find a way forward in life, the way forward in their own lives. This is BAFTA season, is it not? You may have stayed up late. It's one of those programs you have to stay up, you get caught by, don't you? And you wait up for the next one and the next one. Not like the Oscars, however. They go on forever, don't they? And then in the States. However, do you remember a year ago, perhaps 2 years ago, Helen Mirren, Dame Helen Mirren? Do you remember when she won her Lifetime Achievement Award? And do you remember she came onto the stage very gracefully and she rightly thanked her long-lived with husband who'd been such an influence on her life. But then she held up her BAFTA. Do you remember? Any educators amongst us can't forget this, so take this story home with you. She held up her BAFTA, and she said, "I dedicate this BAFTA to a lady who, when I was 12 years of age and the educational system wasn't reaching me, I wasn't terribly good at my maths, my English, my sciences, or whatever, but there was this woman spotted me, and she saw that I had some dramatic talent. And she nurtured me, and I've kept in touch with her throughout my career. I've been in touch with her when I've failed to get a part, or I've had a doubt about whether I should do a part. She has been my mentor, if you like. She has stepped back with me time after time after time." And she said to the gathering in the Royal Opera House, "Any of you with similar experiences?" And a whole forest of hands went up. That they'd found someone in their lives who made that difference to them at a particular stage. She then concluded her remarks by saying that Alice Welding, who was the teacher who spotted Dame Helen Mirren when she was 12, Alice Welding died a fortnight ago, aged 102. We never can tell how the little that we communicate may find a resonance in the life and soul of another that may last their whole life long. And how important it is that we should be like the Greeks in our lives. Maybe this is a way we do find meaning and purpose in our lives. The Greeks often spoke of themselves as seed sowers under the shades of whose trees we may never sit. Seed sowers under the shades of whose trees we may never sit. And maybe we need to come back to, it's so good to have Gillespie McMillan here as the minister of St. Giles, and also Callum MacLeod, the new minister, the former and new. Great to see you here, so I'm on tricky ground here if I get this wrong. But the proper and correct translation of the second commandment would be that to love your neighbor as yourself. Unfortunately, in the Jewish Christian tradition, that has often been preached at us as love your neighbor instead of yourself. And really the translation is love yourself well enough, self-care, self-monitor, step back to know who you are and where your life might, so that you can love another person in the way that you would like to be loved. Such a difference, is it not? From loving someone just instead of yourself, but knowing yourself well enough so that you can be there and you can operate through intuition and wisdom. So thank you all for coming. Thank you not least to Kay from New York, to Ian from London, from Hodder, and to all of you who've made a particular effort to be here. It's a most distinguished gathering. We are honored, are we not, Drew, to have such a great gathering and collection of people. And all I would say on departure is to thank you for listening so well and so long, but step back. Find the way forward for you in your own life.
Thank you, Norman. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have an opportunity where there are books available, and Norman is keen to offer to sign those if you so wish, and that will just be happening at the table at the back of the room there. Before we hand over for some more opportunity to enjoy each other's company and refreshment of our drinks with the canopies, I'd like to say a run of thank yous, and if I can hold the clapping just to the end in terms of making sure, I would like to say thank you to Kay Macaulay, my father's book agent. You have held our hand through since 2004, I understand. For that, we're incredibly grateful. Thank you, Kay. Ian of Hodder, thank you very much for supporting my father in his journey to writing and publishing his third book. It's great that you're here, and thank you again for your continued support. I would also like to thank Archers Hall. This is a magnificent venue, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's got such history to it, and it's just something a wee bit different. So we were delighted to be able to have this as an opportunity to not only launch the book, but invite you as our guests and friends to be able to share and enjoy in such wonderful surroundings. The caterers, we wouldn't have had quite the evening without them, so I'd like to say thank you to Greens. They've done a magnificent job. But it would be remiss of me not to give a really big thank you to Wilma Shalladay and Hilary Black. I hope that you will feel encouraged to continue to think about how we might take the focus and discipline to step back. But that begins by having a conversation deeper than how's the weather with the people around you. So if we can just deal with the uncomfortableness and be able to cross the room to talk to you, you're all amongst friends, and I would encourage us to enjoy the time that we do have remaining to really look at and think about what does step back mean for you, and what is the message you might take outside of this room so the message can be paid on and to me to last longer than what we've been able to enjoy this evening. Thank you again for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting this evening, and I hope that we will be able to have the opportunity to keep in touch, and if there's any conversations that need to happen offline away from here, Drummond International will be delighted to hear from you. Thank you very much.